I'm George Dow, and I have the great privilege of being co-chair of Green Christian, along with my fellow co-chair Deborah Tompkins. And it's just great to be here. And thank you to Staffan yet again hosting so beautifully, and to all of you who've pressed the invitation link and have found yourself here. And it's lovely that you're here. So just a little bit about myself as introduction. I joined Green Christian 14 years ago, and I recall actually at one of Deborah's recent workshops, she said that when she joined Green Christian, she felt that she joined her tribe, and and I love that. I completely get that, and I still feel that today. It's very, very good. So I spent about 40 years in London, living and working there. And about 3 years ago, that's why Jacqueline is my wife. She's a lay reader in the Anglican Church. And we moved to Penzance in Cornwall. We came to our beloved Cornwall. And I'm very much involved in the local church. It's trying to get a Green Church Kernel Award, which is a bit like Eco Church, but we're Cornish, so we have to do things differently down here. And also I'm involved in the music group and also ecumenically across Cornwall churches and so on, various things that we're doing. And also I paint and I write poetry as well. So it's a good time here. I'm going to talk for roughly 25 minutes, and just a brief note how I'll structure it. If any of you were at the previous two workshops, I'm going to be following the same structure basically. And that's a few words on the way of life in general. The topic for this evening, which will be public witness. The resources which Green Christian can provide to help us with this. And what I've personally found helpful in my own public witness awareness. So first, a few words about the way of life. Now, I'm aware that perhaps all of you, I'm not sure, will have attended at least one of the other sessions, and you're probably thinking, oh no, he's not going to talk again about this, is he? Well, I will, but just for a minute, because some of you may not have been, and it's a good reminder anyway, I think. So this is the third of 4 Wednesday workshops on Green Christian's way of life, being held between May of this year and October of this year. Each of those 4 workshops covered one of what we call the spiritual disciplines, which is 4 of the elements of the way of life. And that's daily prayer and devotions, living gently on the earth, public witness, and encouragement. So a little bit about the way of life in general. Excuse me. It's offered to Green Christian members for whom care of God's creation is, in all its forms, is a fundamental outworking of their faith, and who feel that they would benefit from having a structure to their creation care journey. Now, the way of life is a calling for deeper engagement and shared encouragement. It's a way of life which focuses exclusively on creation care in these urgent times. Companions are those Green Christian members who have made a commitment publicly to follow the way of life. Explorers are those who have expressed an interest but don't yet feel that they're ready to do this. They may well be members of other rules of life like Iona and Third Order Franciscan and so on, and that's absolutely fine, of course it is. I'll mention here briefly the support that we provide to companions and explorers. We provide monthly letters. They're not newsletters. They're actually personal journey letters of companions. It's about describing their experience, probably recent experience, as a companion in the way of life. We hold Zoom gatherings every 2 months for companions and explorers, and these have been running now for about 15 months. And so far we've covered the significance of art and poetry in our journeys, moving what we call the subversive into the mainstream, prayer and encouragement, the significance of stories, Lent reflections and actions, the role of non-violent direct action in protest, living gently on the earth. And the next one, on the 20th of September, will be on COP26, and specifically on the themes of nature, climate justice, joy in enough, and hope, where those will be explored by companions and explorers. And finally, we also provide an annual gathering, at least we did up until about 2 years ago when something happened. But we really hope to be able to hold that again, probably in London, in late January or February. So that's for companions and explorers. And for companions only, we've also set up 16 regional groups, which we call encourager groups. And they've been Zooming each other, I'm sure, and hopefully maybe even starting to meet, who knows, in the near future. So that will be a great day. And we have currently 64 companions. Okay, let's move on to the topic for this evening, public witness. Now, what do I mean by public witness? Public witness is about how one acts in the public sphere, outside of the church, perhaps engaging with others who have a similar concern for God's creation, or perhaps doing so on one's own. I was looking online today for other definitions of Christian public witness, and I came across one from an organization called, as an American organization called Christian Peacemaker Teams. I think it's a really excellent definition for their purposes, which is to support in a non-violent way those people who have been treated unjustly. I'll put a link to the website in the resources, which I've sent to staff, and they'll be sent out to you. But I've adapted their definition to make it more appropriate to Green Christian and our way of life. I haven't shared this with other companions. I've just found it today, and it just seemed I wanted to share it with you. So here it goes. We believe in Jesus. We believe Jesus witnessed publicly in a prophetic critique of the social, political, religious, and economic structures of his time. In this tradition of Jesus, a tradition carried on by Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and many, many others, public witness is any public act, done for the purpose of influencing public policy and or articulating or challenging social, religious, and political values. Some examples of direct action include passing out leaflets, participating in a public prayer vigil, holding signs on a picket line or something similar, collecting signatures on a petition, marching in a demonstration, or risking arrest by breaking a civil law. Now, I'm going to qualify that bit about breaking the law in a few minutes. It goes on to say that public witness is sometimes described as speaking truth to power and is rooted in the philosophy of non-violence and love of enemy. Public witness seeks to transform the other person or organization through a loving yet prophetic engagement. I think that's a good definition and almost totally appropriate for the companions of the way of life, where our focus, however, is exclusively on the care of God's creation. And I was thinking about this when I went for a walk this morning. Just like the other elements of the way of life, the list of examples of public witness seem to be endless. And it would be great to hear from you all about the things that you've been doing. I'm sure you'll come up with some examples that I haven't thought of. And this is why it's good to share and come together, because it may well be that some things which might instinctively have come to you and you may think are commonplace and are likely to feature in other people's actions, may not have come into their minds at all. So do share. When we talked about prayer in that first workshop, we started by defining it. And I proposed that it could mean all kinds of things. It could be contemplative prayer, liturgical prayer, other types of collective prayer. And indeed, contemplative prayer can be collective as well. It could be sung prayer. It could be prayer when we're doing things, like Brother Lawrence, who prayed. He saw washing dishes as praying, or early Celtic Christians praying as they worked the fields and with the animals. And when we talked about living gently on the earth at the second workshop, again, we defined it and came to the conclusion that we all know what we mean by living gently in our own lifestyles. But that can mean a whole host of different things for other people, even people who are, in inverted commas, just like us, or at least we think they're just like us. And video recordings to both of those workshops are available on the Green Christian website. And again, the links will be available in the resources. Now, when we approach the third element of the way of life, which is public witness, we'll attempt to do the same thing by defining it, which we've done. And now we'll explore what that means for us as individuals, depending on our contexts, where we are in our journeys, where we live, what's available to us. And also we'll look at it from the point of view of different types of public witness, and that might be collective, individual, international, national, or local. And let's do that now. Collective public witness. Here are some examples, and there will be more. Well, supporting international or national organizations, which are also involved in the care of creation in all its forms. And immediately one thinks of Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth, or the RSPCA, or the Soil Association, and so on. There are just so many to choose from. Secondly, supporting organizations or movements which focus specifically on protection of the planet. For example, Extinction Rebellion and Christian Climate Action. And that second one is a community, you probably know, as a community of Christians who are close to our hearts in Green Christian, and in fact comprise many of our members who are, during these 2 weeks, in the front line of Christian activism on the streets of London. I mentioned earlier about breaking the law. I should point out, as charity, Green Christian cannot be seen to support any action which has the intention of breaking the law of the land, because that potentially affects our charity's commission status. But we do pray for our members who are doing this vital work. And while we can't publicize their events, we do record what they've been doing. And some of you may have read the incredibly moving testimonies of CCA members when they've appeared in court. They're incredible. And more locally, perhaps we can do public witness by participating in campaigns to save wildflower meadows from inappropriate developments. And in fact, we in Penzance were the first town in the UK to achieve plastic-free status. And there's also a very effective Surfers Against Sewage campaign group. So I'm very thankful for that. I didn't play any part in that at all. I don't surf. And they achieved the status before I did anything about it, really. So there you go. And what about public witness, which can be done by us as individuals rather than with others? Writing letters to local representatives, such as MPs and local councillors, about creation care topics, such as the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill, or going along to the local open council meetings. Or yourself, or maybe you've thought of this, or some of you have, standing for election in either local or general elections. Becoming a local councillor, just a great way of actively getting your voice heard and affecting change. And if that feels like a step too far, perhaps joining a political party or a citizens' assembly and getting green issues raised. So, and I know the 4 elements of the green Christian way of life aren't chronological. They certainly are interconnected, but sometimes they feel to me a little bit chronological, and I'll explain what I mean by that. We begin, let's say I begin with prayer, and that continues each day. And then I try to act in my own life in an effort to live gently on the earth after prayer and with continuous prayer. And then I look up and outside myself and see what I can get involved with. And that is public witness. So there is a kind of almost kind of rhythm to this. They are interconnected, and you can start at various bits in those 4 elements. But to start with prayer seems to be logical, I think, to me. Some examples of public witness might even be considered a calling, which you feel that God is calling you to do. And if that's the case, then that's wonderful. Not everyone experiences this. And if you feel that that is the case, it will get you through all sorts of barriers, because you know that God is with you in this. Again, that would be interesting to share any experience of this. If, on the other hand, you feel that it's not a calling, and it's just something you've been encouraged or asked to do by someone else, and that sometimes happens, doesn't it? In fact, it often happens. This is when what you're being asked to do doesn't feel to be something that you're particularly comfortable with. Then, of course, pray, seek advice from someone whose opinion you trust. And okay, that might not be a calling, but it may be something which is needing to be done, and it may not come natural to you. And maybe even as God saying, here's a challenge for you. What do you think? Are you going to step out and do it or not? Like you did with Moses and Mary. Okay, so what resources can Green Christian offer to help us live gently? As you can imagine, Green Christian is, as an organization, is asked to support campaigns. And when a new request comes in, our board members consult and decide whether to support it. Campaigns which we've supported in just the past 5 weeks have included these: a letter to the Prime Minister on the Cambo North Sea development to stop gas and oil exploration off the Shetland Islands, a letter to Michael Gove and Gavin Williamson from Teach the Future to ask for their support and Lord Knight's bill to make education in the climate crisis to be mainstream in all schools curricula. Sign up as an official signatory to Zero Carbon Campaign's declaration. The UK must drive an ambitious carbon pricing agenda at COP26. And finally, we agreed to sign the Robin Hood tax declaration, urging greater taxation of the fossil fuel sector to fund an international facility for loss and damage to provide financial resources to people and communities hit by the climate crisis, and to invest in a just transition that delivers green jobs, energy and transport in the UK. And whenever we feel such campaigns should perhaps be brought to the attention, or perhaps you're all aware of these things, or perhaps we should remind people that these things are going on, then we also write, and they might want to write letters themselves. Then we always include such campaigns in the Green Christian newsletters, which come out every couple of weeks. And I see, at least I think I saw Judith there a minute ago. Is Judith? She is there. Yeah. So Judith sends out these Green Christian newsletters. An excellent resource which is very much current and can be found, hi Judith, an excellent campaign resource which is very much current and can be found on our website on our COP26 page. You could find linked pages to Climate Sunday. Again, I'll provide a link to those resources. And this gives you lots of information and resources, including one of the 26 of the prayers that Rod, one of which Rod used this morning, provided by John Swales. And what it's all about, what individuals can do in the run-up to COP26 in November, and what they can ask their churches to do as well. And a consistently wonderful source of great examples of public witness is to be found by reading members' contributions to C-Link, which is our members' email discussion group, which has 250 subscribers with 640 messages posted on 566 topics. I didn't count them. I think I probably got this from Judith, some of which have been on campaigns, both national and local. And of course, the shared encouragement from other way of life companions, from our regular Zoom meetings, both national and regional. There are many, many great examples of public witness which can be shared there. So just finally, what have I found personally helpful? Well, I remember at the last workshop on living gently in the earth, I think I said to that question, I found everything helpful, which isn't very helpful really to you. So even if I'm already doing some of this stuff, I feel affirmed by hearing it again, if you like. So I'm going to end now by showing you some books which I found to be helpful in my own journey. And here are just a few books. There's loads of them actually, but I've got about 6, I think. Here are a few books which you may find helpful. You may well have read them. And I've tried to not repeat books which I included in the first 2 workshops. So those refer to prayer and living gently. So the ones I'll mention, I think, are specifically about public witness. Okay, I've got several books by Alistair McIntosh, Scottish Quaker writer and campaigner. And here's 2 of them. Okay, this is Soil and Soul. Soil and Soul, People versus Corporate Power. This is from 2001, but it's become a bit of an iconic book, I think. And it describes his involvement in a campaign for community ownership of a Hebridean island. It's a fantastic piece of spiritual activism, I think. And which brings me to his more recent book, and I think his most recent book, which is called Spiritual Activism. And here it is. And he's written this book with Matt Carmichael, who's a young colleague of his. This is from 2016. And I love what's written in the back. This is by Sir Jonathan Porritt, who's one of Green Christian's patrons. And he says this about this book. With its clarion call that spirituality is central to activism, this is truly a book for our age, challenging the preconceptions of most activists, let alone those who still see spirituality solely as an inner journey. So that's from Jonathan, and that's from Alistair and Matt. And talking of Jonathan Porritt, there's a great segue into this next one. This is a really, really old book, and you can probably guess what it is. It's by Jonathan Porritt, and it's from 1984. It's a long time ago, which means it's dated. Some of it's really very dated, but I think in terms of the kind of gleaming of inspiration that comes from this book, and remember that was written such a long time ago, 40 years ago almost. It's a fantastic book, and it's called Seeing Green. And it's the book which kind of turned me on to green activism, really. The Politics of Ecology Explained. And incidentally, Carolyn Lucas also said that that was the book which started her own journey as a green activist. And finally, 2 recent books. This is Not a Drill, probably aware of that book, an XR handbook, and which is self-explanatory, and you probably know the main details of it. But it's an excellent book, I think, and a sister publication. I mentioned Christian Climate Action earlier, and this is a sister publication called Time to Act, a resource book for Christians in Extinction Rebellion, and that was from 2020. It's a wonderful collection of personal stories and testimonies by lots of people, some of whom you may already know. It's truly inspirational. So that's been a quick run through an overview of the way of life, resources and support which Green Christian provides to encourage public witness, a personal perspective, what's important, and been the influences in my own life. And I hope that you found that useful. I'd be really interested to find out about what you found helpful in your own lives. So thanks very much for staying with me. Thanks. Back to Stefan, I think.
Wow, thank you very much for that, George. I think we just open it up for discussion, and what you can put your paw in the air and I'll see, or you can just talk to us, because there's only a dozen of us, so that's quite comfortable. So any thoughts, any feedbacks, any examples that people would like to share? Let me ask you a question, George, and as I'm not hearing others coming through yet, is that we've seen quite a shift in public perception and understanding of the climate crisis over the last 2-3 years. Probably, XR, was it 2 years ago now, or 3 years ago? Where the big thing in London really helped to start shift all sorts of perceptions. And most people I talk to go, yeah, there's a climate crisis. They just don't know what the heck to do about it, or how to change their lives, or how to engage beyond just this is a thing of what's happening to me here and now. What's your perspective on that? How is our messaging? There was one point when our messaging was, there's a climate crisis, there's a problem, and people going, la la la, don't want to hear it. Now it's a different place, isn't it? And how should our messaging, our public witness, be moving with that?
Right. Thanks, Stefan. I think that's an interesting question, and I can certainly empathize to an extent with many of the people who still feel that. It's a huge issue, and it's generally seen as something which large corporations and governments can do something about, but individuals can't. But I think there's been a real movement, a real change in that, and we're moving beyond recycling and so on, and we're actually thinking globally. We really are thinking globally, and great programs by David Attenborough and others on national television, and also I think the reporting in the media, which, and some parts of the media, which may well have been negative on demonstrations and dismissive of the climate crisis, are not doing that anymore. Well, there may be some newspapers that are, but I haven't seen them. And I think there's a growing awareness, and I think it's moved so much from, say, 3 years ago, and people get it generally. Not everyone does, and that's never going to be the case. And also, we tend to use language, and the press do it as well, and probably we do it to an extent. We use kind of warlike language. This cropped up in a C-Link discussion over the last few days. I know I commented on it, And we talk about battling climate change. We talk about climate change is the kind of enemy and we'll overcome it or we won't overcome it or whatever. And I think it's time to perhaps move away from that kind of language. It's happening and we need to certainly not embrace it, but it's not the enemy, if there is an enemy, it's not the climate. And I'm not going to call them enemies. It's the people, as the governments and the large corporations, which have it within their power to do something about it. I know I'm beginning to sound like Greta Thunberg here, and that's not a bad thing. Actually, I miss Greta's book. Greta's book, it's a fantastic book. But I think, sorry, that's a very long answer to your question, but I think I feel much more positive about the awareness of and the opinion of great masses of the population now. I think it's moving in our direction, if you like.
Be very interested to hear other perspectives on that from around the people involved.
Brian has unmuted himself. Does that mean you want to come in, Brian?
I'm still thinking on what you've just been saying. It's lovely to come and meet you all, but I still have this kind of feeling that this is my own very personal feeling, is I want the church to be leading this, not the government even, not the corporations. There's too many vested interests. And it seems to me the church can really step out of vested interests and take a role of leadership. But I've been involved a little bit on the Dowson Environment Committee and various other places. And I still don't feel at this point in time, even though I'm aware that more and more people are understanding what is going on, and you can't miss it. If you're watching those fires the other side of the world, you're watching the flood. In fact, nearly every news program you go on has got something about climate change on it now, and you just keep repeating it ad nauseum. But it's to actually come up with policies which government are prepared to accept to move on. And I just feel that the governments have a vested interest anywhere is to keep in government, and it's a big issue for them. You know, they want to stay in charge, and therefore I think they try to please everybody, and therefore avoid making decisions which are going to be really significant and really hard, and decisions which are going to be quite difficult to implement. I mean, I see everything now as deeply urgent. I mean, deeply, deeply urgent. I've been on this wavelength now for nearly 40 years. And constantly thinking, well, to be fair, 40 years ago, I thought this was going to happen. You know, we're going to have climate breakdown, but I put it at about 150 years ahead. And when I used to talk to people about 150 years ahead, I could see them go blank. You know, 150 years, so it doesn't involve me. Now, I think we're at a point now where, you know, it's going to involve me even, and I'm getting on, but it's certainly going to involve my children and grandchildren. And I think COP26, at this point in time, is the last chance. I really, really think if the decisions don't come correct out of COP26, then we're in real deep problems ahead. And you know, when the scientists start using the word catastrophic, that's when it's got serious, because they tend very much to be very careful and of what they actually say. You put it even down into percentages of things, but when they come to say, if you don't do this, things are going to be catastrophic. Now, I don't think the church has got the message. I really don't think that the Church of Christ on the planet has got the message. When I look at the American church, I'm totally appalled. Absolutely, totally appalled. Somebody said, yes, this thing, climate change, might be happening, and the sooner it goes on, the sooner Jesus comes back. You know, what a strange attitude. Let's make more people suffer. And I don't think that's the right direction. And I don't think the church should be thinking like that. I think we should be looking around and seeing that already throughout the planet, people are suffering. I don't know if anybody here is involved with Operation Noah. I was at an Operation Noah meeting, it was about 8 years ago. And there was a fellow from Bangladesh who came to the meeting. And we all talked about climate change for a while. And then he said, can I just pass this little photograph around? He had a little photograph about that size. And he passed it around. And we all looked and thought, why is he showing us this? And it was a seagoing vessel on land. And then he said, when he'd been around the number of people in the room, about 30 people there, he said, I don't think the people in England really fully understand about climate change. You see, that boat is 40 miles inland. It's 40 miles inland. And it's been demolished. As I came away, it had been taken to pieces and removed. But all the land for 40 miles inland has been salted. And it's absolutely, totally useless for agriculture. And he says, you know something? The people in Bangladesh know now that they've got a problem. This was 10 years ago nearly. And it was what I was saying, like, you haven't grasped the urgency. And I think we're still in that kind of situation. The church hasn't grasped the urgency. I'll shut up. I've said enough.
No, that's a very useful contribution. Thank you very much for that. A lot of good stuff. Well, I'll hand it to George, and then who else would like to come in?
Well,
Judith would like to after you, George. Yeah.
Okay, just very, very briefly. Thanks very much, Brian. That was so needy to be heard. Thank you. I just wanted to. I'm not going to talk about in this instance the church. Perhaps leave that to someone else. But you mentioned about grandparents and so on, and I think funnily just before everyone joined, Stefan and I were having a conversation about grandchildren, and when I look into my grandchildren's eyes, I wonder what on earth is going to happen, and I wonder, what we talked about in that first question about general awareness and feelings about climate change amongst the population. And I think those people who are around about the same age as most of us, who either have children, possibly, or know of children, or have grandchildren, must really, really be asking themselves what kind of world they are going to live in. And that would I could either go one of two ways. One reaction is yet again, well, we can't do anything about it, so we'll just enjoy things or whatever. Or it could be that personal, that deeply relational, blood relational relationship of the grandchild. It may well be that might spur that person onto public witness, onto public action. And I think that's probably all I'd say on that. But I think Judith was going to speak perhaps on something else.
Judith. Over to you, Judith.
Can I share screen briefly? So this Sunday, Ruth had been telling us about having a thing like sharing a table. So we announced it, put it in the paper. We're going to have a meeting up to the public at a table outside the church. It's bugged me the whole of the COVID period. Our church actually hasn't met outside. There's such wonderful opportunities to meet outside. Anyway, so we set up the table with our pink tablecloth. We didn't paint it pink, and there were 3 other people who came later. So we just had an open meeting to discuss the climate emergency. That's a picture of us discussing it. At the moment we've got a Settle Flower Pot Festival, and this is a picture of this is John Wesley, a model made of flower pots, and we do COVID vaccinations, which is why it's got a mask on. But anyway, I just wanted to show us that at Settle we are doing our public, that was a bit of public witness. Now, can you see me? Right. So on Sunday the 5th, we've got Climate Sunday, and I'm in the process of making some posters to go up in town. We've got a red red telephone box churches together in Settle have. It needs cleaning, but there's plenty of space to put up some posters. So if you do a poster, there's only any point in doing it if it's big enough to read. But I'm very fortunate, at least we are in the Methodist Church in Settle, that the two other people apart from me who are green, even greener than me, so we're going to do a climate service. The minister says we can do that. St John's Methodist Church, Settle. But I only realised after we'd actually done this table that the reason why Christian Climate Action were encouraging it, and Green Christian have been promoting it separately, setting up a table to have a discussion, is that it's linked with the Extinction Rebellion demonstrations that are happening now. It's just a shame that the Extinction Rebellions have sort of clashed with the Afghan problems, because the Afghan problems get far more news on the radio than other things. But that's our bit in Settle anyway, to do something to do with the climate emergency. Okay, back to you.
Could I say something? Oh, sorry.
Sure, you go ahead.
Go for it.
Well, I was just going to sort of say about the church. Brian, I was so moved by your contribution just now, and I think it's good for us to lament together, isn't it? And to be aware of the grief that we're feeling. And as people who are out there sharing publicly, and I mean, our church is heading up for lots of stuff between the 5th and the 12th of September. But people still see it as my thing, as Anne's thing, the two of us that are doing this. And you do that, and we'll do the bits that we think are important. And that's even after Dave Bookless spoke to us in June when we had an Environment Sunday. And he really made it so clear that, you know, the creation care and creation groaning and needing sort of rescue, as it were, it's part of the gospel. You know, we preach forgiveness of sins and all of that, but we really have lost the vision of actually care for creation. So anyway, we plod on, and one of the things which came to me, which I was really inspired by, we were down in Thanet, right on the southeast of England, and we got the Broadstairs Bulletin, which is the local paper for Broadstairs. And one lady had written her vision for what Broadstairs might look like in 50 years. Now that really inspired me, because I thought, yes, we're talking about what's happening and it's all really bad and so on. But actually reading somebody's vision, sort of saying where there were car parks, we now have allotments, and things like Manston Airport, you know, no longer will there be any discussions about whether it will ever be an airport or a lorry park or sold for houses, but it will just become the local amenity, you know, more allotments and so on. And it was just such a life-giving sort of lateral thinking, just very positive, you know, that there'll be a local college which specialises in renewable energy, and people will be coming to learn about it and so on. So it's led us where we are. You know, we've got the Environment Sunday service, well, the climate justice. We're having a local hustings with members from our local council climate board. We will do it. I mean, I don't know how many people are going to come to these things, but the fact that we put it out there and we're trying, I think must be a good thing. A week of prayer stations in one of the churches using Christian Aid material, actually. And then an eco fair. We've actually got Paul Carenza to come and sign books, you know, Planet Protectors. And I don't know how many children will come, but, you know, we're giving books to the local schools and hoping that people will come. And then Sunday the 12th at 5 o'clock, it's giving people a chance to reimagine and have this sense of hope. But I do feel completely weary, because we're still getting this message, you know, Anne and I, that this is our thing, and patting us on the back and saying, yes, it's very good, but they haven't really taken it on board as a central thing. However, I don't know if can you see that? This is, could I read it? Because you can't really see that, can you? It's basically a comment from the Bishop of Norwich on the IPCC report. And Brian, he's the lead bishop in the Church of England who's taken on the mantle, if you like, of the environment. And it says quite clearly, we are seeing the effects of the climate emergency around the world, and it is the world's economically poorest people who are already suffering the most. So it is our moral duty and a Christian calling to do all we can to try to turn the tide. And it sort of basically says at the bottom, wake up world. Now, I put that in our latest Keeping in Touch, and I've not had any feedback. I get minimal feedback, even suggesting that people contribute to buying books, you know, Planet Protectors to have available for Paul Krenzer to sign for children. But I think people just don't see it as their problem, and maybe they feel it's too big a problem. Maybe they've been sold the lie that it's all about litter picking and, you know, planting a tree or whatever. Because in a way it does feel a bit like a lie, because we are doing that as much as we can. But even in our local parks where we've got our little saplings planted with the plastic round them, how many years is it going to take for those to grow and actually have an impact? But anyway, I mean, that's where we are. And I do feel encouraged by the bishop, although I think Graham Usher needs to listen to Dave Bookless's talk, because it isn't just about doing what we can, it's about actually making this the gospel message.
Amen. No, I think that's really helpful, George. And then Barbara, and then we need to let people go if they want to.
Just a quick one. Thank you very much, Jill. That was really helpful. You know, as you were speaking there, I was also thinking about this whole idea, and I'm sure everyone here has experienced it in their church, that you know, some people get it, some people don't get it. And I remember at one of the Deep Waters sessions, for those of you who perhaps don't know, Green Christian have been running a program called Deep Waters, which just finished a few weeks ago, but we may well be running it again early next year. And it's about eco-grief and lamenting. And it's been really rather special to come together and do that and admit how we're feeling, really. One of the people at one of the sessions, I recall, it stuck in my head, said that they were tired, I mean, literally exhausted, trying to persuade other people in their church about the urgency of climate change and how those people just don't get it. And now the person said, now I now just work with those people who do get it. I know all my energy goes into people like this meeting now we're having. You know, we all get it, don't we? And because it's exhausting, the other stuff. And some people just will not get it. And we just have to kind of let that go. And for the first time, really for the first time 2 minutes ago, I was thinking of a kind of parallel with this from the Bible, where, you know, Christ and his disciples took his disciples out to villages, and he said, you know, find the people of peace, and you know, if there are none around, then just wipe the dust off your feet and go to the next village. And I think everything is so urgent now to spend. I'm speaking of projecting here my own feelings. I'm not going to spend personally too much of my time and remaining time in this earth, trying to convince people, fellow Christians who are lovely, lovely people and doing great work for Christ, about the urgency of this. Knowing, if I know that they just won't be convinced, I put all my energies in with people who do get it.
Thank you.
And together we'll hopefully make a difference. Sorry, Barbara.
No, that's a lovely thing to end on, George. All I was going to say was some churches are working on this, Brian. What you say resonates, but thousands of churches over the country have held a climate Sunday in their individual church. And the Christian environmental organisations, together with the secular organisations, are cooperating together and working their socks off at the moment to try and get messages through to government on COP26. So things are going on, and we will continue to. But yeah.
Thank you for that. I'm now going to stop the recording, and we're going to ask Rod to pray with us, and we can continue after that for a while for those who want to, and those who want to go can go.